The signal reached the Galactic Empire on an ordinary rotation cycle. It was faint, full of static, almost meaningless to their ears, but it was there. A voice carrying through space filled with music, coded words, and human laughter. At first, the Imperial scientists thought it was just background noise, perhaps the remains of an extinct world echoing its last messages into the void. But when they traced it, they found something unexpected. A small blue planet circling a yellow star at the edge of a forgotten arm of the galaxy. The Empire had seen thousands of worlds before, but this one was different. It was too alive. Clouds moved in perfect balance, oceans reflected sunlight like a jewel, and strange machines circled the planet. The readings showed strong radio waves, electromagnetic pulses, and atmospheric changes. To the Empire, that meant only one thing: intelligent life. They had found a young civilization, industrial, loud, and unaware that it was being watched. The decision to make contact was made quickly. For the Galactic Empire, such encounters were routine. They were used to discovering new species, offering them peaceful integration, and if that didn't work, well, their fleets ensured it would. They believed no primitive species could resist them. Why would this one be any different? Their ships arrived near the outer planets of the Sol system. The Imperial fleet hovered in silence, scanning everything, recording the magnetic fields, reading the atmosphere, and monitoring every transmission. They heard the human broadcasts, songs, speeches, weather reports, stories, even arguments. It was messy, chaotic, emotional. To the Empire, humans sounded like children playing with fire. So the commander of the fleet prepared the standard transmission. It was short and simple, translated into every major human language. This is the Galactic Empire. You are now part of our domain. Do not resist. Cooperation will bring prosperity. Refusal will bring consequence. It was broadcast across every open frequency. The Empire expected panic. Usually, lesser worlds begged for peace or sent desperate messages or tried to hide. But Earth did something strange. It said nothing, no reply came. No message. No acknowledgement. The Empire waited hours, then days. Still nothing. Their translators confirmed the message had been received, but the humans stayed silent. For the first time, the Imperial observers grew uncertain. Did the humans not understand? Were they too primitive to reply, or were they ignoring the Empire on purpose? On Earth, however, the silence was not fear, it was focus. The moment the signal was detected, every major power on the planet came together. Satellites that once watched the weather now pointed toward the stars. Scientists worked without rest trying to understand who had spoken. Governments went into lockdown. Not from panic, but from preparation. They knew what the message meant. They were not alone anymore. And whoever had sent it believed they were in charge. There was no argument about what to do next. Humanity had spent centuries fighting each other, but this time the threat wasn't from another nation or another ideology. It came from beyond the sky. For the first time, the people of Earth united, not out of trust, but out of survival. A secret meeting was held between global leaders. They decided not to respond to the Empire's demand. Instead, they listened, they watched, and they learned. Every radio frequency was analyzed, every pattern recorded. Humanity would not bow down to an unseen power. If there was to be a fight, they would at least know their enemy first. Days passed, and the Empire grew impatient. Their pride could not handle the silence. No world had ever ignored them before. The commander ordered the next step, a demonstration of power. A small group of Imperial warships moved into Earth's orbit. They were vast metallic giants glowing in the dark, their hulls covered in alien script. The ships hovered above the planet like silent mountains. From orbit, they sent another message, louder and clearer. Submit, or be erased. On Earth, people finally saw them. Across cities, cameras captured strange lights crossing the sky. For the first time, humanity looked up and saw something that wasn't a star or a meteor. It was a visitor. News channels went silent. The world froze, but the fear didn't last long. In secret military bases, in underground control rooms, and aboard orbiting stations, humans were already preparing. They had weapons not as advanced as the aliens, but far more practical. Railguns, missiles, stealth drones, machines built for real wars, not ceremonial shows of dominance. The Empire's ships scanned the planet again, noticing how human satellites were suddenly changing their behavior. Some of them turned toward the Imperial fleet. Their data streams spiked. Their heat signatures shifted. The commander laughed. In his mind, those were primitive attempts at communication, or worse, weak defense systems. Then one of the Imperial ships vanished from the radar. No explosion. No light. Just gone. Confusion spread among the Imperial officers. They checked their systems, recalibrated sensors, and thought it might be a malfunction. Then another ship lost contact. A flash appeared near its hull, tiny, almost invisible, and then the entire vessel tore apart, shredded by a projectile traveling faster than their systems could register. For the first time, the Empire realized they were under attack. Humanity hadn't stayed silent out of fear. They had stayed silent because they were planning their first move. Down on Earth, people watched the skies with held breath. Nobody cheered. Nobody celebrated. They all knew what this meant. A war had started. Not a war for land or wealth or politics, but for existence itself. In command centers hidden under oceans and inside mountains, men and women watched as Earth's defense systems engaged. Every nation's satellites linked together in a global network. Civilian space stations became military relays. Every communication device, every radar, every sensor became part of a single united system. They didn't know what kind of weapons the aliens had. They only knew one thing: whatever came next, they would not surrender. Meanwhile, high above, the Imperial commander faced something he had never experienced before: uncertainty. His fleet, though powerful, was being outmaneuvered by a species that had never fought in space before. The humans used tactics that didn't make sense: random maneuvers, strange formations, and weapons that ignored conventional rules of warfare. To the Empire, it was chaos. To humans, it was adaptation. The battle near Earth's orbit lasted only minutes, but to both sides it felt endless. When it was over, the Empire withdrew their remaining ships to a safe distance. They couldn't understand how a primitive world had destroyed them so easily. Their energy shields meant nothing against solid projectiles moving at impossible speeds. Their systems, built for predictable warfare, were useless against the unpredictable creativity of human engineers. Back on Earth, the skies cleared. People came out of shelters, looking up at the stars that seemed so peaceful again. The governments of Earth didn't release the full story to the public, but word spread anyway. Some called it a miracle. Others called it a warning. Scientists across the planet knew what had just happened wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something far greater. Humanity had survived its first contact with a galactic power. And somewhere out there in the dark corners of space, the Empire was regrouping, studying and planning their next move. But the humans were planning too. The world that once fought over borders now began building for the stars. Shipyards were expanded. New materials were tested. Every resource was poured into one goal: to never be caught unprepared again. Earth's message to the universe was clear, even if it was never spoken out loud. We heard you. We saw you, and we are ready now. The Empire didn't realize it yet, but that silence they had mocked would become their greatest fear, because in that silence humanity had awakened. And when humanity awakens, the galaxy learns to listen. The Empire had never faced humiliation before. For thousands of years, they had ruled the stars without challenge. Every species that dared to resist had been crushed, every rebellion silenced before it began. But now, a small blue world at the edge of the galaxy had broken that perfect record. The reports were still coming in, fragmented, incomplete, and full of confusion. The Imperial commanders refused to believe the data. How could a young, primitive race destroy 2 of their warships? How could they even detect the fleet? The Empire's ships were cloaked beyond the technology of most advanced species. Yet somehow the humans had seen them, tracked them, and hit them with impossible precision. The commanders blamed everything they could: faulty systems, cosmic interference, even sabotage, but deep down, they knew the truth. They had underestimated humanity, and that was their biggest mistake. Back on Earth, the world had changed forever. The governments that once worked separately were now sharing information like never before. The shock of the alien arrival had turned into determination. Humanity realized that the universe was far larger than they had imagined, and not all of it was friendly. In the first few weeks after the battle, Earth's skies were quiet, but the planet below was alive with preparation. Factories that once built cars now produced spacecraft components. Research labs started working day and night on propulsion systems, defense shields, and long-range sensors. Engineers collaborated across countries, united by one purpose. If the aliens came back, Earth would not just defend. It would fight back stronger. There was fear, of course. People were scared of what was out there. But something strange began to happen too. Humanity started to feel proud. Proud that they had stood against something so powerful and survived. News channels that once spread panic now spoke of courage. People looked up at the stars not with fear but with resolve. While Earth rebuilt, the Galactic Empire held a secret council. In a massive chamber aboard a ship the size of a city, high-ranking officials argued over what to do. Some wanted to ignore the humans, claiming it was not worth another embarrassment. Others demanded revenge, saying the Empire's image was at stake. In the end, they decided to send a larger force, not an invasion but a full-scale operation. Their goal was to capture Earth quickly and erase any trace of their previous defeat. They believed that once their armada arrived, humanity's courage would collapse under the sheer weight of the Empire's power. But the Empire didn't understand humans yet. When the Imperial fleet arrived near Mars, they expected to see panic again. Instead, they found silence just like before. Their scanners showed the human communication networks were active, but there was no fear in the signals. It was as if humanity was waiting for them. The commander ordered his fleet to move closer to Earth. The massive ships drifted past the orbit of the moon, casting long shadows over its surface. The humans didn't attack immediately, which confused the Empire. They thought maybe the humans had exhausted their weapons or their will to fight. They were wrong again. Hidden beneath the moon's surface, in secret tunnels carved deep into the rock, humans had built something extraordinary. It was the largest railgun ever constructed, a weapon that used electromagnetic force to fire solid metal rods at unimaginable speeds. It was silent, invisible, and deadly. It had one purpose: to protect Earth. The humans waited until the Empire's fleet reached the right position. Then, without a word, the weapon fired. From the Empire's perspective, there was only a flash of light before one of their largest ships split apart. The impact was so fast that the sensors didn't even register it until it was over. Panic spread across the Imperial command decks. Their instruments went wild. They started firing in every direction, trying to find the source of the attack. But the humans had already gone dark. Every human satellite, every transmitter, every ship disappeared from their systems. To the Empire, it was as if Earth had vanished behind an invisible curtain. Then the second strike came. 3 more ships exploded almost at once. The rest of the fleet scrambled to retreat, but something strange happened. Their communications were being jammed. The humans had hijacked their frequencies, feeding false data into their systems. Some Imperial ships saw phantom targets that didn't exist, while others turned their weapons on empty space. The humans weren't just fighting. They were controlling the battlefield. From underground command centers, human operators watched carefully. Every move was calculated. Every strike was planned. They weren't celebrating victories. They were surviving minute by minute. The leaders knew that if they made one mistake, Earth could still be wiped out. The Empire tried to adapt, but their tactics were too predictable. They relied on power and intimidation, while humans relied on creativity and instinct. The humans didn't fight like any species the Empire had faced before. They didn't retreat when outnumbered. They didn't surrender when surrounded. They simply adapted. Every time the Empire deployed a new strategy, humans found a way around it. Every hour, new data was analyzed, new tactics were tested. The Empire's strength was vast, but their imagination was limited. Humanity's imagination, on the other hand, had no boundaries. When the battle reached its peak, the skies above Earth turned into a dance of lights. Beams of energy crossed paths with metal projectiles. Explosions glimmered like stars, but down on the planet most people didn't even see it. They were underground, watching news updates, holding on to hope that their world would survive. In one control bunker, a scientist looked up at the large screen showing real-time satellite feeds. His voice trembled slightly as he spoke to his team, but his words carried strength. "We can't stop now. They think they're fighting machines, but they're fighting people." Those words spread across command centers like a spark. It reminded everyone why they were fighting, not for glory, not for power, but for home. For the right to exist freely, Meanwhile, in the Empire's fleet, frustration turned to disbelief. Their advanced shields couldn't stop human projectiles. Their scanners couldn't find hidden launch sites. Their communication systems were filled with static and false signals. They were being defeated not by superior technology, but by pure determination and cleverness. After hours of chaos, the Imperial commander made a decision that shocked his crew. He ordered a retreat. For the first time in Imperial history, a superior fleet was forced to flee from a planet that had barely begun exploring its own solar system. The Empire's pride was shattered. When their ships finally jumped out of Earth's orbit, the humans didn't chase them. Instead, they powered down their weapons, maintaining silence once again. No victory speech, no declaration, no arrogance, only a calm, steady silence. On Earth, the people didn't know all the details of the battle, but they could feel the change in the air. The night sky looked the same, but everyone knew something invisible had shifted. Humanity was no longer the same species that had looked at the stars with simple wonder. They were now the defenders of their own world, a civilization that had stood up against the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and survived. In the following days, a single message was transmitted from Earth into space. It wasn't long or complicated. It was just one word: run. The Empire received the message loud and clear. At first, they dismissed it as arrogance. But as their commanders replayed the footage of destroyed ships and analyzed human tactics, fear began to settle in. They realized that if a species this young could cause so much damage now, what would they become in a century or a millennium? Back on Earth, humanity began rebuilding again, stronger than before. They didn't celebrate. They didn't boast. They just continued working, quietly, methodically, determinedly. The stars were no longer a mystery to them. They were now a reminder that somewhere out there others were watching, and so, under the same sky where humanity had first seen alien ships appear, construction began on new ones, human ships designed to travel beyond the solar system. They weren't built for conquest. They were built for defense, for exploration, and for a single unspoken promise: humanity would never be caught unprepared again. The Galactic Empire thought they could frighten Earth into submission. Instead, they had awakened something far more powerful. They had awakened unity. The humans didn't start this war. They never wanted it. But now that it had come to them, they had learned what it meant to face the unknown and win. And across the silent stars, the Empire carried that memory with them, a warning that echoed louder than any threat. If you see the humans, do not challenge them. Do not test them. Just run. The silence that followed the Empire's retreat felt strange. For weeks, nothing came from the stars. No signals, no warnings, no strange movements. The skies were calm again, almost too calm. Some people believed it was over, that humanity had scared away the invaders for good. But those who understood the truth knew better. The Empire hadn't surrendered. They had only stepped back to prepare. On Earth, people tried to return to normal life. Children went back to schools, cities reopened, and the news slowly shifted from fear to pride. Humanity had done something no one thought possible. They had faced an empire that ruled countless worlds and survived. Yet behind that pride there was tension, an uneasy awareness that the danger wasn't gone. It was only waiting beyond the dark. Inside hidden underground bases, world leaders and scientists met again. Their faces were calm, but their voices carried weight. The first encounter had taught them a lesson. Survival depended on preparation. The humans had fought with what little they had and won, but next time that luck might not hold. So a new plan began. It wasn't just about defending Earth anymore. It was about understanding the galaxy. Humanity had always been curious, always hungry for knowledge. Now that same curiosity became their greatest weapon. They started collecting every piece of data they could from the battle. The debris left behind by the Empire's destroyed ships, the signals they had intercepted, even fragments of alien technology that had fallen into the oceans. Scientists around the world studied the alien materials in silence. They didn't announce their progress, but slowly, humanity began learning secrets that had once been beyond imagination. They discovered new ways to generate power, new metals that could survive in the harshness of space, and communication methods that made their old systems look ancient. The Empire had unknowingly given humans a gift, the key to faster growth. Meanwhile, ordinary people began to change too. The fear that once held them down turned into curiosity. People started looking at the stars with a mix of fear and excitement. For centuries, the night sky had been full of mystery. Now it was full of potential. Some dreamed of reaching other worlds. Others joined space research programs, hoping to protect Earth in case the Empire returned. The sense of being small and helpless was gone. Humanity had found its purpose. Months passed and humanity's new space network started taking shape. A massive ring of satellites was placed around the planet, not just for defense but also for observation. They called it the watch line. Every movement in space, even the smallest, was tracked. Nothing would approach Earth unseen again. Then one day a signal was detected, faint, distant, but familiar. The Empire was back. The message wasn't a threat this time. It was encrypted, complex, and it took days for human scientists to decode. When they finally did, what they read wasn't what anyone expected. It wasn't an ultimatum. It was a warning. The Empire wasn't the only power out there. Beyond their own borders existed something older, something that had wiped out entire civilizations. The message was short, and it ended with the same word humanity had sent months before. Run. At first, Earth's leaders didn't believe it. Why would the Empire warn them? Was it a trap, a trick? But when deeper scans of space revealed strange energy readings far beyond the Empire's territory, doubt turned into worry. For the first time, humans and the Empire shared something in common, fear of something greater. While the Empire struggled to recover from its defeat, their outer colonies began vanishing without explanation. Entire star systems went dark. No distress calls, no survivors, nothing. And soon, rumors began spreading among the surviving alien worlds. Rumors that pointed to Earth. They whispered that the humans had created new weapons from stolen Imperial technology, that they were expanding beyond their system, and that they were the reason for the disappearances. Of course, none of it was true, but fear spreads faster than facts. The Empire, desperate to protect its image, declared humanity a Class Omega threat, a title given to species too dangerous to approach. But humanity didn't even know this yet. They were busy preparing for their own future. The newly formed Terran Defense Alliance began building larger ships. They didn't call them battleships or warships. They called them explorers. Each one carried scientists, engineers, and a few defense systems. Their goal was not to conquer, but to learn, to map the stars, to find life, to understand what was coming. When the first explorer ship left Earth's orbit, people across the planet watched it on live broadcast. It was the first human-built vessel meant to travel beyond the solar system. There was no cheering, no loud celebration, just quiet awe. Humanity was stepping into the galaxy not as victims but as survivors. But deep in the cold reaches of space, the Empire's command council watched, uneasy. They could not understand how humans had recovered so quickly. In just a few months, Earth had built ships capable of interstellar travel, technology that had taken the Empire centuries to develop. To them, it was unnatural, impossible. They began to realize a truth they didn't want to accept. Humans learned faster than any species they had ever encountered. They didn't need centuries of slow evolution. They learned through conflict, through challenge, through necessity. Every time they were threatened, they grew stronger. Every time they were attacked, they adapted. The Empire sent spies disguised as traders and explorers to gather information about Earth. Some reached the outer edges of the solar system and returned with stories that sounded impossible. They claimed humanity was building something massive near Jupiter, a structure larger than any station the Empire possessed. They said the humans called it the Forge. In reality, the Forge was a construction platform, a place where humans tested their new technologies. It was not a weapon, at least not yet, but it symbolized something more powerful than any gun or cannon could ever be. It represented human persistence. People on Earth still lived their lives. Children played, families grew, and the planet continued its rhythm. But above them, humanity was evolving. Every ship launched, every test run, every experiment brought them closer to understanding the vast universe that had once terrified them. Then, something unexpected happened. A strange signal appeared in the watch line, a distress call repeating endlessly. It wasn't human, but it wasn't Empire either. It came from an unknown source somewhere beyond the solar system. The message was short and broken, but one word was clear in the translation: help. The leaders debated what to do. Some wanted to ignore it, fearing it might be a trap. Others believed they should respond. In the end, humanity's curiosity won. They decided to send a small team to investigate, their first mission beyond their own territory. When the explorer ship reached the source of the signal, what they found changed everything. It was an alien ship, badly damaged, drifting alone in space. Inside, there were survivors. Not Empire soldiers, but another species entirely, thin and fragile, terrified and starving. The humans rescued them, brought them aboard, and offered food and safety. It was the first peaceful contact between humanity and another intelligent race. The rescued aliens told a story that made the human crew's blood run cold. Their world had been destroyed by something they couldn't describe, something that consumed energy and light, leaving only emptiness behind. Their message wasn't meant for humans specifically. They had sent it in every direction, hoping anyone would hear. When the humans brought this story back to Earth, everything changed again. The Empire's warning had been real. Something terrible was moving across the stars. But humanity didn't panic. They had faced fear before. They had survived worse. Instead of hiding, they began planning again. The scientists studied the alien survivors, learned from their knowledge, and shared their findings with the world. The idea of us and them began to fade. It wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about everyone who wanted to live freely in the galaxy. Back in the Empire, whispers spread of human kindness, of how they had saved the refugees instead of exploiting them. Some Imperial citizens began questioning their own leaders, asking why the Empire feared such a species that showed compassion even in strength. In the halls of power, the Empire grew uneasy. Humanity had become something new, something unpredictable. They weren't conquerors, but they weren't victims either. They were something in between, a balance of heart and strength that no empire could understand. As months passed, human ships began to travel further, building small outposts on nearby moons and planets. They sent peaceful transmissions into deep space, not as warnings this time, but as invitations. Their message was simple: we are here. We mean no harm, but we will defend ourselves if needed. And somewhere in the darkness of space, far beyond any telescope or scanner, something ancient stirred. A presence that had been sleeping for ages, now awake because of the noise humans had made. But that story was still ahead. For now, Earth looked up at its night sky, glowing with countless stars, and understood something it never had before. The galaxy was vast, dangerous, and full of mystery, but humanity was ready for it. The discovery of the refugees changed everything for humanity. The story they brought with them spread like a quiet storm across Earth's leaders and scientists. Somewhere beyond the Empire's reach, something existed, something powerful enough to erase entire civilizations without warning. The Empire had feared it, and now humans understood why. The refugees spoke of a darkness that moved through the stars like a wave. It didn't communicate, didn't negotiate, didn't even conquer. It simply consumed. Planets that once shone with cities and life now floated as lifeless rocks. Their surfaces burned smooth. The survivors called it the silence because every signal, every voice, every trace of life vanished wherever it passed. At first, some humans doubted their story. It sounded impossible, like something from an old myth. But the refugees were not lying. The humans analyzed their ship's data logs and found proof, patterns of destroyed systems, the strange radiation traces, the same emptiness the refugees described. The threat was real. Earth's leaders gathered again in secret. The room was filled with tired eyes, the kind that had seen too much too soon. The debate was long and quiet. Should humanity prepare for another war or try to stay hidden? The Empire might have been their enemy once, but this new danger threatened everyone, including them. After days of silence, the decision was made. Humanity would not run. They would prepare. The Terran Defense Alliance, which had once been created to protect Earth, expanded its mission. It was no longer just about defense. It was about survival of all intelligent life. Scientists and engineers began working around the clock, using every piece of alien technology they had recovered. The forge near Jupiter became the center of this effort, a floating city of workers, thinkers, and dreamers, building something that had never been built before. But this time, humanity wasn't alone. The rescued aliens, grateful for their survival, offered their knowledge. Their technology was different, older, gentler, more energy-based. When combined with human engineering, it opened doors no one had imagined possible. Energy shields stronger than before. Engines that could travel faster than light. Weapons that didn't destroy but disabled. Humanity was evolving faster than ever. The Empire, still licking its wounds from the last war, began to take notice again. They watched from afar, trying to understand how humans had grown so much in so little time. Some of their commanders called for another attack, fearing humanity's rise. But others hesitated. They remembered the last time they had challenged the humans, and how disastrously it had ended. Instead, the Empire sent a single messenger ship under a white flag, a symbol of peace. When it entered Earth's space, the watchline detected it instantly. For a moment, Earth's defenses locked on, unsure if it was a trick. But the message that came from the ship was clear and calm. We seek dialogue, not war. It was a moment few would have ever believed possible. The same empire that had once demanded Earth's surrender now asking for peace. The meeting took place. Aboard a neutral space station orbiting the Moon, the human representatives stood on one side, dressed in simple uniforms with the emblem of Earth on their shoulders. The Empire's envoys arrived in their shining armor, but this time, their voices were softer, their tone respectful. They admitted their defeat, something unthinkable for them in the past. They also shared their fear. The same force that had destroyed the refugee worlds was moving closer to Imperial borders. The Empire could no longer face it alone. For the first time in galactic history, humans and the Empire sat across from each other not as enemies, but as allies facing the same unknown. The agreement that followed was fragile, full of doubt and tension, but it was a beginning. Both sides agreed to share limited technology and information. The humans would send explorers beyond Imperial space to gather data on the approaching threat, while the Empire would protect the outer sectors. It was an uneasy peace, but it worked for a while. As months turned into years, human explorers traveled deeper into the stars. They mapped abandoned worlds, collected strange readings, and saw things that defied explanation. Giant scars across planets, where cities once stood but were now melted into glass. Every clue pointed toward the same conclusion. The silence was real, and it was spreading. Back on Earth, people began to sense the weight of it. The night sky that once inspired wonder now felt heavier. Yet, even with that fear, there was determination. Humanity had faced the unknown before, and every time they had survived. This would be no different. To prepare for what was coming, the forge near Jupiter was expanded into something even greater. Engineers called it the Bastion. It wasn't just a station anymore, it was a fortress, a symbol of human unity. It could build ships faster than any planet-based factory, and had defenses strong enough to protect the entire solar system. When the first of the new generation ships launched from the Bastion, it shone with light brighter than any star in Earth's sky. People watched from every screen on the planet knowing what it meant. Humanity was ready to face whatever was out there. Meanwhile, something unexpected began to happen among the Empire's people. Rumors about humanity spread faster than their leaders could control. Stories told of humans who fought without fear, who helped strangers, who built alliances instead of empires. Entire colonies started questioning why they should continue following leaders who had brought only fear and control, while the humans offered cooperation and hope. The Empire's council tried to silence these voices, but it was too late. The idea had already taken root. For the first time in its long history, the Empire's grip began to weaken, not because of war, but because of inspiration. Humans didn't mean to start a revolution. They had only wanted peace. But by standing tall and refusing to bow, they had shown the galaxy another way to exist. Then one day, the silence of space broke again. The watchline detected something massive, far beyond the size of any known ship. It wasn't moving like a fleet or a formation. It was drifting, but slowly changing direction toward inhabited systems. At first, both the Empire and the humans thought it might be debris or a rogue asteroid. But when their instruments tuned in, they found no heat, no signal, no life. Just an overwhelming emptiness that seemed to absorb every form of energy around it. The refugees had been right. The silence had arrived. Across the galaxy, communication channels erupted. Worlds prepared for the worst. The Empire scrambled its fleets while humans readied every defense they had built. The Bastion activated in full for the first time. Massive railguns, energy barriers, and drone networks came online. Earth's skies glowed faintly blue from the power surge. Still, deep down, everyone knew they weren't ready for what was coming. The first system that encountered the silence was one of the Empire's border worlds. Then the transmissions stopped. Not destroyed, just gone, as if erased. The Empire's fleets tried to make contact, but every ship that approached went dark within minutes. On Earth, people watched the live data feed showing the vanishing of entire systems. There was no explosion, no light, just nothing. The fear that humanity had once buried returned, colder and deeper than ever, but fear didn't stop them this time. It moved them. The alliance between humans and the Empire grew stronger overnight. Scientists from both sides shared everything they had, human ingenuity mixed with imperial precision, creating new forms of technology never seen before. The Bastion became the center of this effort, a beacon of hope surrounded by the dark. For weeks, the two civilizations worked without rest, building a fleet that would stand as the galaxy's first united defense. On the day the new fleet launched, the commander of the operation stood before the gathered teams. His voice was steady, though his eyes showed exhaustion. "We don't know what this thing is," he said quietly, "but we know what we are. We are the ones who fight for life. We are the ones who refuse to disappear." Those words echoed through every communication line, reaching every worker, every pilot, every technician. It reminded them all of one thing, the same truth that had carried humanity through every struggle. Survival was not about strength. It was about unity. As the great ships drifted toward the dark horizon of space, Earth watched silently once more. The people didn't know what would happen next, but they had faith in one thing. Humanity had faced impossible odds before, and each time they had endured. The Empire might have taught them fear. The silence might have brought despair, but together they had found something stronger, hope. And somewhere beyond the stars where light met darkness, that hope would soon be tested in ways no one could yet imagine. The first joint fleet between humans and the Empire looked like something out of a dream. Thousands of ships, some sharp-edged and heavy like the human dreadnoughts, others sleek and glowing like the Empire's cruisers, moved together through the darkness. For once, the galaxy's two most different species shared the same goal: survival. The silence was no longer just a rumor. It had already swallowed 3 systems without leaving a trace. No explosions, no debris, no signals, just emptiness. Even the Empire's most advanced scanners couldn't understand what was happening. But the human scientists at the Bastion had an idea. They believed the silence wasn't simply destroying matter. It was absorbing energy itself. Every photon, every signal, every trace of motion. It didn't kill in the way war did. It erased. For humanity, that idea was terrifying. Yet it also gave them something to study. And study was what humans did best. At the Bastion, a young physicist stood before the Council of Commanders. His voice trembled slightly, not from fear but from urgency. "If this thing feeds on energy," he said, "then we can use that against it. We can lure it, trap it by giving it what it wants." The idea sounded insane at first, but when humans had first faced the Empire, their survival had also sounded insane. And yet they had done it. So plans were drawn. A massive structure began construction in orbit around a dead star. It was called the Mirror Array, a web of thousands of satellites designed to focus and redirect immense amounts of energy. The plan was simple: lure the silence toward the array, then overload it with more energy than it could absorb. But there was one problem. The array had to be activated manually once the silence drew close. That meant someone would have to stay behind. Despite that, volunteers came forward without hesitation from both the Empire and the humans. It was strange to see former enemies stand side by side, ready to die for one another. It showed how much had changed. The war between them felt like a distant memory now, replaced by something far bigger. Weeks passed as the fleet traveled through the darkness, following the faint trail of the approaching silence. Every day the crew watched as another system went dark. The emptiness seemed to spread faster, like a tide gaining speed. When they finally reached the edge of the affected region, their sensors went wild. Everything, light, sound, even the flow of time, felt wrong. The stars ahead seemed dimmer, as if something was eating the glow out of space itself. The fleet held position. The commanders issued orders quietly, afraid even sound might draw attention. Then slowly the enemy appeared. It wasn't a fleet. It wasn't even a structure. It was more like a shadow, a massive field of shifting darkness that moved as if it were alive. No edges, no form, just an endless, silent wave that swallowed everything in its path. The first contact was chilling. A human scout ship drifted too close, and within seconds its signals vanished. No explosion, no trace, just gone. The fleet opened fire, unleashing beams of light brighter than a sun. For a moment, the darkness seemed to ripple, but then it simply absorbed the energy and grew larger. "It's feeding on our weapons," one officer whispered. The human commander clenched his jaw. "Then we give it something too big to eat." That was the cue. The fleet began to retreat, pulling the silence toward the trap, the mirror array. It followed almost as if it understood, drawn by the massive energy output of the satellites waiting ahead. Days turned into weeks as the chase continued. The soldiers aboard the ships barely slept, living on adrenaline and determination. Messages from Earth played across the comms to keep them going. Children sending hope, families saying prayers, entire cities watching their progress from across the stars. When they finally reached the array, everything was ready. Thousands of satellites were positioned like diamonds in space, reflecting the light of a captured star. It was beautiful, an artificial sunrise in the middle of darkness. The silence began to spread toward it, the void stretching wider, devouring the light as it came. The energy readings spiked beyond anything ever recorded. That's when the human physicist spoke his final words to the fleet. "It's time." He stayed behind, inside the control module of the array, alone. His job was to manually synchronize the satellites for one final burst. He knew he wouldn't survive it. As the darkness surrounded the array, the fleet watched from a distance, powerless to help. The energy reached critical levels. Then, for the first time in years, the void trembled. A light brighter than anything seen before burst outward. The mirror array exploded, not destructively but brilliantly, releasing a surge so strong it bent the fabric of space itself. For a few moments, everything went white. Then silence. When the sensors cleared, the fleet couldn't believe what they saw. The darkness had stopped. A massive portion of it had collapsed in on itself, leaving behind a glowing rift, a scar in space, but one that no longer moved. The plan had worked. Humanity had stopped the silence, at least for now. The fleet erupted in cheers. Even the hardened Imperial soldiers couldn't hide their relief. For the first time, both sides shared a victory that didn't come from conquest but from unity. The commander looked out at the distant glow where the array once stood. His voice was soft. "He did it," he said. "He really did it." Back on Earth, when the message arrived, the world stopped. Every screen showed the same image, the burst of light from the mirror array. People cried, cheered, and prayed. The name of the scientist who stayed behind was remembered not as a soldier, but as a savior. But while the galaxy celebrated, some noticed something strange. The readings near the collapsed rift showed instability, like the void wasn't fully gone. It pulsed faintly as if something inside was still alive. At the Bastion, analysts worked day and night to understand it. They found that the silence hadn't been destroyed, it had been contained. The energy burst had trapped it in a kind of stasis, frozen between dimensions, but that also meant it wasn't truly gone. If the containment failed, it could return stronger. The Empire's council, terrified by the discovery, proposed building a wall of defense systems around the affected region. They wanted to isolate it completely, but the human leaders disagreed. "Hiding won't save us," they said. "We must understand it, learn from it, because next time, it won't give us a warning." It was a tense moment, one that almost reignited old mistrust between the two civilizations. But after long debates, a new agreement was made. The joint fleet would remain stationed near the rift, monitoring it day and night. Humanity and the Empire would share full command equally. Over the next months, that region of space became known as the Boundary. It marked the edge of the known universe and the limit of life's reach. Pilots who patrolled near it said the stars there felt colder, quieter, as if space itself was holding its breath. The years that followed brought peace unlike anything the galaxy had known. Trade routes reopened, refugees resettled, the Empire began to reform, influenced by the humans' ideas of cooperation and freedom. Children born during those years grew up never knowing war. They only knew stories of the battle against the silence and the people who gave their lives to stop it. But the scientists never stopped watching. And sometimes, late at night, their instruments detected faint whispers from the rift, patterns of energy that shouldn't exist. Not enough to alarm the public, but enough to remind them that peace was never permanent. Then one day, deep within the Bastion's research center, a signal came through. It wasn't random. It wasn't static. It was structured like language. The message was short. Only 3 words. We are awake. No one could say if it was real. The data was incomplete, the signal weak. But those who saw it knew what it meant. The silence had survived, and this time it might not come to destroy. It might come to speak. Across the galaxy, preparations quietly began again. Fleets upgraded, defenses reinforced. The peace that had lasted for years was about to be tested once more. Yet among the fear and uncertainty there was also something else. Hope. Humanity had already faced extinction twice and endured both times. They had learned that courage wasn't about never feeling fear. It was about standing up even when fear was all that remained. As the stars watched silently, the galaxy waited for whatever was coming next, because everyone knew one thing. This was not the end. It was only the warning before the next beginning. The war had ended, but the pain and the memories were still very fresh for those who had survived. The once bustling cities were now quiet, ruins scattered across the land. People who had lived through the attacks walked slowly, their faces tired but determined. No one spoke much about the battles they had fought or the losses they had faced. The silence was heavy, filled with a kind of respect for everything that had been lost. What everyone knew deep inside was that this war was not just a fight between humans and the Galactic Empire. It was a warning, the kind that stays with you forever. The message was clear. If humanity stayed where it was, it would be destroyed. There was no room for error, no chance to bargain or ask for peace. The only choice left was to run. The survivors didn't talk about running as an act of weakness. For them, it was an act of strength. It was the only way to keep the hope alive. The people who escaped had a purpose bigger than themselves. They were the keepers of the future. They carried stories, memories, and lessons that could save generations to come. Every person who managed to flee the Earth was haunted by the thought of those left behind. Families were separated, friends lost. The pain of leaving was deep, but the instinct to survive was stronger. They had to keep moving, because if they stopped, they would be caught and the whole human race might disappear. The evacuation was the largest in human history. People gathered wherever they could, space stations, old ships, secret bunkers. The journeys were long and dangerous. Supplies were scarce and every day brought new challenges. But there was also an unspoken bond between the travelers. They were united not just by fear, but by a shared dream of rebuilding what was lost. As the fleets moved away from Earth, many looked back with heavy hearts. Some whispered promises to return one day. Others prayed for those who couldn't escape. The stars, once just dots in the night sky, now represented hope and a chance to start over. Life aboard the ships was difficult. Space was cold and lonely. People missed the feel of the ground beneath their feet, the sound of birds, and the simple comforts of home. But stories told around small fires in crowded cabins kept spirits alive. Elders spoke of Earth's beauty, the green forests, vast oceans, and endless skies. These stories reminded everyone what they were fighting to protect, not just their own lives, but the soul of humanity. Even in the darkest times, the human spirit refused to break. People found ways to laugh, to create, and to dream. Music played softly in corners. Children ran through narrow corridors, and friendships formed in the most unlikely places. It was clear that humanity was more than just flesh and bone. It was the connection between people, the hope that tomorrow could be better. But the warning was always there, lurking in the back of everyone's mind. The Galactic Empire was not defeated. It had only paused. Their power was vast, and the war had shown how fragile human life was in the grand scheme of the universe. The Empire's first strike was a brutal lesson, a reminder that there were forces out there far stronger than humans. Leaders among the survivors worked hard to unite the scattered groups. They shared information, resources, and plans. The hope was to build a stronger defense, to be ready if the Empire came again. But the truth was, humanity was still young in the universe, and learning how to survive was just the beginning. Some people argued about what should be done next. Should humanity try to fight back? Should they hide and wait? Or should they focus on building new homes far away, places where the Empire could not find them? These debates were often heated, but everyone knew one thing for sure. Running was the first step to surviving. The stories of the war were told and retold, passed down through generations. They became more than just memories. They became warnings written into human history. Every child learned about the Galactic Empire and the terrible cost of ignoring the signs. These stories weren't meant to scare, but to prepare. They reminded everyone that the universe was a dangerous place and that survival required both courage and wisdom. Among the survivors, there was a deep respect for the people who had fought and fallen. Monuments were made in empty space, memorials built on new colonies, and moments of silence observed across ships. Their sacrifices were not forgotten. They were the reason the human race had a chance to continue. At the same time, there was hope for peace. Some believed that one day humans and the Galactic Empire could find a way to coexist, but that day would come only after humanity grew stronger, smarter, and more united. For now, the warning was simple and clear: run. The lesson from the First War was that running wasn't just about escape. It was about learning, adapting, and surviving to fight another day. It was about protecting what made humans special: their resilience, creativity, and ability to come together even in the darkest times. As years passed, the survivors continued their journey through space, searching for a place to call home. They faced many dangers: hostile environments, scarcity of resources, and the constant fear of being found. But they never gave up. Their stories of escape and survival became legends, a beacon for those who would come after. In the end, the First War against the Galactic Empire was humanity's greatest trial. It showed how fragile life was and how quickly everything could change. But it also showed the strength of the human heart. That strength was the true warning and the true hope. The message was clear to anyone who listened. The universe is vast and sometimes cruel. The Galactic Empire's warning was harsh but honest. Humanity had been given a chance to run, to learn, and to survive. And maybe, just maybe, someday to thrive.